Welcome, dear listeners, to another exciting journey through the world of books. Get ready to be spellbound as we dive into the captivating pages of The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Also, thank you very much for your support. The Affinity Charm, a journey. A stranger comes to town. In Build, the Affinity Charm won, while his wife Lizzie lay in bed breastfeeding their son Gregory. Bix told her he longed to talk. He had no one to talk with in that casual, wide-open studenty way they once had in college. None of his colleagues at his company, Mandala, conversed that way. Bix took a walk in the city. It felt new to be anonymous. Since Mandala's success, everyone knew him. He wondered about his marriage and how his work had dictated his life. The only person he talked to was Lizzie's mother. On his way to the subway, he saw a flyer advertising an on-campus lecture to be given by Miranda Klein, the anthropologist. Her book, Patterns of Affinity, fascinated Bix. He considered attending the talk following the lecture in 3 weeks. In 2, Bix attended the talk at Columbia. The attendees included Portia, Rebecca, Tessa, and Ted. Bix pretended to be Walter Wade. They discussed Klein's book, which presented algorithms explaining trust and influence among members of a Brazilian tribe. The group wondered if what happened to Klein's theory made her a tragic figure. Her algorithms had been used by large tech companies. Bix wondered if he could start his life over. His original vision had birthed Mandala, a tech company who implemented and monetized that luminous sphere of interconnection by allowing users to upload their memories online. Suddenly, his work felt worthless. In 3, Bix and Rebecca talked on the train. Bix soon learned Rebecca knew who he really was. In 4, Bix kept walking. Near the river, he remembered the night he was with friends, Drew and Rob. Rob had drowned. He considered his past. In Case Study, no one got hurt. 1, Ted's son, Alfred, was tired of inauthenticity. Perpetually isolated, Alfred developed projects to process his emotions. One project was a documentary about the migratory patterns of. In 2, after Ted and Portia's discussion group, Rebecca contacted Alfred, curious about authenticity in the digital era. Rebecca had heard about his recent project. He would scream in public places in order to watch the public's response. In 3, Alfred began to scream in public. In one setting, a woman named Kristen showed interest in his project. 8 months later, they were traveling to Chicago together to see Alfred's family. Alfred screamed on the train, embarrassing Kristen. This episode gave him new revelations. In 4, throughout the evening at Miles's, Alfred felt bored. To create some excitement, he asked his brothers and mother about their childhood friend Jack. Jack had been Miles's best friend. Their friendship ended when Miles discovered Jack and their mother, Portia, were sleeping together. After an argument, Alfred announced he was going to visit Jack. In 5, Alfred and Kristen visited Jack. Throughout the visit, Kristen noticed how unwell Jack seemed. Instead of confronting him, Alfred treated him like a friend. He later told Kristen, who was Rebecca in disguise, that the experience changed him. In a journey, a stranger comes to town, Miles. When Miles learned that his cousin Sasha had found success making sculptures out of discarded plastic and erecting them across the California desert, he was baffled. Sasha had had a rough life. Despite her mistakes, she was accomplished and had a happy family. Miles wondered why he had failed when all he had ever done was try to succeed. He had become addicted to opioids, had an affair, injured his lover, and ruined his marriage. Desperate to know how Sasha had succeeded, he decided to visit her husband Drew, and son Lincoln. In Drew was reluctant to host Miles. One of the last times they had seen him was during a visit to Bix. Ever since Rob's drowning, Drew had been desperate to know the truth of what happened. Mandala helped him revisit the scene. In Miles, while Lizzie cooked, Miles and Drew looked at her art. In Drew had an uneasy feeling about Miles. The following morning, he took him to see Sasha's art from a hot air balloon. In Miles, from the sky, Miles realized the significance of Sasha's work. Suddenly overwhelmed by failure, he tried jumping from the basket. Drew stopped him. Miles stayed with Sasha and Drew. Drew and Miles developed a kinship which inspired Miles to change and move forward. Rhyme scheme. What the forest remembered. In Rhyme Scheme, Lincoln was so in love with him, he had become obsessed with calculating their chances of being together. He developed an experiment to test her interest in him. Lincoln grew discouraged when he discovered M had begun dating Mars. He remembered the list his sister Allison had made of his attributes. He thought most of the nice things she had listed about him were relative. At Harvest, Lincoln's job was to find proxies orchestrated by Mondrian, a not-for-profit based in San Francisco. Mondrian's proxies maintained the established patterns of an individual's online activity to let them disappear. The proxies protected individuals' privacy. Companies like Mondrian were a reaction to Mandala. One day, Lincoln's team learned that someone inside Harvest was working to help the eluders. Lincoln suspected Mark. After the meeting, Lincoln met with M. The conversation began awkwardly, filling Lincoln's mind with numbers and data. He thought about his own consciousness and Mandala's own, your unconscious, and Mandala's own, your unconscious. Then Lincoln told M that he liked her. Not long later, M and Mark were engaged. Lincoln slipped into depression, lying in bed performing calculations. Finally, Harvest found the infiltrator, and Lincoln returned to work. In a few months, he got a promotion. At an event, he and M ran into each other for the first time in a while. M was no longer with Mark. Not long after the party, M and Lincoln married. In Break, The Mystery of Our Mother, 1, Miranda Klein's daughters, Lena and Melora, relied upon her for everything. The three became especially close after the girl's father, Lau, ran off with a high school girl. Lo had children from other marriages, including Charlie, Roxy, Kiki, and Rolf. Lo did not resurface in the girls' lives until they were 7 and 8 years old. Lab told Miranda he wanted more time with them. They later realized their half-sisters were jealous they were getting the best of their father. Then Miranda disappeared. She allegedly went overseas for anthropological work. The girls feared she had disappeared herself, suspecting she had an online proxy. Meanwhile, the girls lived and grew closer with Lou. Things changed after Rolf committed suicide. The girls later learned that Miranda had found the tribe she was looking for. When she finally returned, she was different. They struggled to reconnect. The girls realized that their father needed them now. Over the years, Lana and Melora's relationship changed. Cracks formed between them, particularly after they read patterns of affinity. Melora patented Emiranda's algorithms and sold them to the social media giant. Bix tried giving Miranda credit, but she had no interest. Meanwhile, Lana followed Lau's footsteps working in music and later joined the Eluders, that invisible army of data defiers. In What the Force Remembers, Charlie obsessively revisited Lau's externalized memories on Mandala to understand the truth of his past. She particularly studied the files during which Lou traveled to the Redwoods with his friends, Quinn, Ben, and Time. Initially, Lou's consciousness was overwhelming to revisit. Then Charlie started to crave other points of view. By making Lou's consciousness public, she could search the anonymous memories of others present in his memories. She was particularly curious about Lo and his friend's Redwoods trip and how their experiences compared to each other. Attempting to get away from the world and procure weed, the men seemed desperate for freedom and connection, increasingly elusive experiences in the present. Bright Day, the perimeter, after. In Bright Day, when Roxy was in her 50s, she attended weekly Dungeons & Dragons sessions at Bright Day, her treatment center. Though she never played, she was fascinated by the way characters were made. She attended Bright Day because she had struggled with addiction for years. The group was run by a man named Chris Salazar. Lau, Roxy's father, had mentored Chris's father, Benny, years prior. Chris developed the group in an attempt to help addicts form connections and recover. Though Roxy enjoyed the dog group, she had no interest in the collective. When it came to Mandala, she only wanted to relive her best days and did not care about other people's memories. Chris ran the dog group with his friend Molly, hosting sessions at recovery centers all over the Bay Area. The program was an offshoot of Chris's Mondrian company. Roxy's family sent her a mandala box. She was thrilled to externalize her memories, desperate to return to the past in order to revisit her happier memories. Getting to know Molly and hearing about Molly's childhood increased Roxy's curiosity about the past, too. Once she began the upload process, Roxy felt as if her brain had been released. Afterwards, she felt prepared to tell Chris and Molly she was ready to make her own character. In I, the protagonist, Chris developed his Mondrian vision while working for Sweet Spot Networks. At Sweet Spot, Chris was tasked with scouring movies and TV shows for every possible stock element of stock narratives. He created equations in order to understand these formulaic stories and characters. His work overlapped with that of Miranda Klein as it attempted to map the genome of human inclinations. As mandala gained in cultural significance, Chris became desperate to protect the individual's private life. He had always tried to help others. After a series of tragic experiences, he realized that he alone was powerless to save those in need. He was particularly affected by his relationship with Pamela and his uncle Jules. One day, Chris visited with his grandmother, father, and cousin Gabriella. The time together made Chris think about the collective consciousness. Chris recoiled from own your unconscious. He was impressed by Bix, but viewed mandala with existential horror. That night at the office, Chris thought he heard people around him. Longing for them to be real, he relaxed into the company of his new companions. In Drop, the Perimeter, after Molly spent most of her childhood at the country club. She was friends with Stella and Iona, but often felt excluded from their friendship. She was also in love with her neighbor, Chris Salazar. She feared the other girls had won his attention. Molly's home life with her family was also challenging. Then one summer, a new girl named Lulu appeared at the country club. Lulu was kinder to Molly than anyone had ever been. She felt like a real friend. When Lulu abruptly left the club, Molly wondered how she had become the core of her friend group in just one afternoon. Lulu, the Spy, 2032, The Perimeter. Before, in Lulu, the Spy, 2032, Lulu worked as a secret infiltration agent. Her company gave her a set of strict rules for how to behave. She was assigned a designated mate and told to pose as his lover. The designated mates were always criminals, whose lives upon which she was supposed to report. She had to practice the dissociation technique in order to get close to them. Throughout her one assignment, she often thought of her husband, longing to be with him again. She had to force herself to lose track of what was always happening for survival. This was particularly the case during sexual intimacy. The goal was to become part of his atmosphere so as to avoid detection. Everything she learned about the designated mate was sent to the company. She had to record his conversations and their interactions, wearing special hidden devices. Oftentimes, the moon was Lulu's only comfort. The moon became like a certain paternal promise. This was ironic because Lulu had never known her father. She had discovered he was a movie star with whom her mother had had an affair, but her mother had had an affair, but had never met him. Ultimately, Lulu had to insert the designated mate's data plug into her universal port, a connection implanted in her foot. Then her company would have access to his memories. The company reminded her that she was making a sacrifice for the collective. She had to complete her mission no matter the risk. She used hindsight to convince herself that her life had led her inevitably to the present moment. The night she inserted the data plug, the designated mate discovered what she was doing. She fled the scene, attempting to reach the hot spot where she could leave the designated mate. The company had never failed to recover a citizen agent, dead or alive, who managed to reach a hot pot. When she arrived at the hot spot, she saw the body of a woman like herself, crumpled and bleeding at the bottom of a boat. She realized the woman was her former self. Though she did not have to, she decided to merge her dissociated self with her old self. Before escaping, she was shot. Desperate to see her husband, she rejoined the old body, consenting to be racked by physical pain. In the perimeter, before, when the neighbor Stephanie Salazar's brother Jules moved in with her, Noreen was skeptical. She asked her children, Hannah, Brian, and Molly, and her husband Bruce, how they could be sure Jules was really her brother. Believing Noreen had grown increasingly unstable, Bruce was less and less tolerant of her paranoia. The children begged their father to be kinder to her. An argument regarding the property line ensued between Noreen and Jules over the following weeks. Both Bruce and Stephanie worked to appease Noreen and Jules. Then one evening, Stephanie invited the family over for a party. Noreen was hesitant to attend because of Jules. Then, at the party, she was disappointed to discover that Jules was hiding in his room. Stephanie explained that he was upstairs because she had made the mistake of inviting his ex. Despite Stephanie's pleas that Noreen leave Jules alone, Noreen traipsed upstairs to find him. Hannah followed. In Jules's room, Noreen confronted Jules, insisting she came in peace. She told Jules he was talented and smart and should not let his ex affect him. Jules listened to her. Hannah noticed he was working on a big project. For the rest of the night, Jules and Noreen were friendly. See below, middle sun, area of detail. In See Below, Lulu's husband, Joseph, emailed his boss about his leave of absence. After taking leave to help Lulu with the birth of their twins, Joseph was still worried about Lulu's mental health. Her time in the citizen agent program had made her paranoid and wary. Lulu's mother, Dolly, emailed Joseph about coming to help with Lulu and the babies. Joseph replied with gratitude. Lulu emailed Kitty, a childhood friend who had become an actress. She had seen Kitty in a film with Jazz Attenborough and wanted Kitty's help connecting with Jazz. She did not tell Kitty that Jazz was her father. Kitty's publicist, Ashley, emailed Lulu saying that Kitty could not make the connection. After Lulu explained who she was, Ashley decided to help her meet Jazz. Lulu said she wanted to do an interview with Jazz and a documentary project with Kitty. Ashley thought the project could help Kitty's career. Although Jazz would not meet with Lulu, when his assistants discovered Lulu's interview project, they thought it would help Jazz's career and agreed to work with her. Lulu contacted her mother about participating in a documentary about their trip to X with Kitty in 2008. She said Kitty was helping her with a job possibility. She did not want Dolly to know she was trying to meet her father. Dolly emailed Joseph, expressing her concerns about Lulu's project. Joseph responded, insisting they let Lulu complete her project, as she was happier than she had been in months. Lulu contacted Jules about helping with her interview and documentary. Although Jules was wary, he agreed to help. He also connected her with Ames Hollander, who had developed a technology to scan the body for data chips. Like Jules, Lulu was paranoid that the government had access to her thoughts and memories. Kitty's and Jazz's assistants and publicists devised a scheme to help Lulu. They staged a meetup between Lulu and Jazz under the guise of interviewing him about his speedboat collection. After fulfilling her elaborate scheme, Lulu developed a relationship with Jazz. She traveled overseas to work on her documentary with Kitty. While away, she emailed Joseph saying she finally understood that she had been yearning for her imagination for years. 302. In build, Eureka Gold won ever since Lizzie and Bick's youngest son Gregory finished his MPhil in poetry. He had felt depressed. 305. 305. Attending writing workshops and literature classes had made him happy. 309. Feeling isolated and incapable of writing, he longed to connect with his former professor, Athena, with whom he had had an affair. Ever since Bix's death, Gregory's despair had felt inescapable. Though he had never been close with Bix, Gregory had always believed a relationship would develop between them. In 2, Gregory traveled across town, thinking of Bix. In 3, Gregory visited Athena. The reunion granted Gregory further revelations about Bix's life. He realized that he and his father were alike after all. On his way home, he realized that human lives past and present were connected around him and inside him. In Middle Son, area of detail, Portia's middle son, Ames, was always forgotten by everyone. Portia, however, cherished her son. She remembered watching him play baseball, thinking about the exquisiteness of her child and his utter inconsequence to others. After an alienated childhood and a difficult adulthood, Ames would search endlessly for his happy ending. Portia wanted to make a story of Ames's life because without a story, it was only information,